Vinaka, and a warm welcome to Speak Your Mind. I'm Louise Kaunisela, and we have a great show today. The United Nations General Assembly last year adopted by consensus Nigeria's resolution to proclaim January 24th every year as the International Day of Education. All the 193 member states of the UN General Assembly supported it. With its historic adoption, International Education Day will be celebrated all over the world, with the first coming up this Thursday. To discuss more on the importance of this day, we're from the Pacific Community, the Educational Quality Assessment Program. This is the EQAP Director, Michelle Belisle. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and it's really good to be here.
It's lovely to have you. But we'll also be having later on coming in the show from UNICEF, the education specialist, Anna Smebi. But on our first question, why is International Education Day important, Michelle?
Well, it's the day that is set aside to recognize and shine a spotlight on the importance of education. And I think it probably goes without saying that education is important all of the time, but this is an opportunity worldwide where the member countries of the UN have recognized and have committed to shining that spotlight on the importance of education and how it affects the world at large.
Okay, so before we discuss further on International Education Day, could you tell us briefly about the work that the Pacific Community's education arm, the Educational Quality Assessment Program, involves?
Sure. We are a technical organization, SPC is, and the work that we do provides support to our member countries in terms of measuring their own education systems and the effectiveness of those systems, and then collecting data that they can use to inform their decision making, hopefully to develop policies, processes that will improve and strengthen their own education systems and the education of the children in the region.
Thank you very much. And has it been welcomed and been implemented well?
Education Quality and Assessment Program is the new name for an organization that has existed in the Pacific here for almost 40 years now.
That's a long time.
Started out as the South Pacific Board for Education Assessment and became a part of SPC several years ago. So what we've been able to do is expand the countries that we deal with, and we keep expanding and growing in response to country requests and the needs that they articulate to us.
Thank you very much. Now, education is the fourth Sustainable Development Goal. This is the SDG 4. How is the EQAP, Educational Quality Assessment Program, supporting the Sustainable Development Goal number 4?
So really good question. That goal number 4 is directed around providing quality and inclusive education for all. And so some of what we do involves measuring progress towards SDG 4, but also it involves looking deeper at the data that countries are able to collect and helping to respond to that data in order to improve the situation. So it's not just about measuring the progress, but it's also about reacting to what we find and helping countries to address gaps, needs, challenges that may appear.
Okay, so I mean, just for our listener, the Millennium Goals, and we've got this as a Sustainable Development Millennium Goals. Maybe you would like to just, explain that.
Sure. Back in the year 2000, there were Millennium Development Goals articulated through the UN, and they involved, in the terms of education, the idea of access to education. So access to education includes ensuring that children are able to start school at an age-appropriate time, ensuring that children have access to a safe school environment and to quality education regardless of where they live, regardless of what sorts of economic pressures there might be, and regardless of things like language and culture that might get in the way of acquiring access to education. So that was back in the year 2000.
Right.
And so over the period of 15 years until 2015, the world worked towards and achieved in large part, in many areas, access to education for all students. What has happened since then is in 2015, again, there were UN resolutions, this time Sustainable Development Goals as opposed to Millennium Development Goals. And the recognition there was access is definitely important, but it's also about the quality and the inclusiveness of the education. And one of the startling statistics that came out in 2015 was that even though many, many more children were in school, worldwide there were over 250 million children reaching the end of primary, which would be year 6 in our context, without being able to basically read and write and do numbers. So that was the quality side of it.
Right. Thank you for that. And what about the progress since then? I mean, what kind of progress has been made? Has it been fast, or has it been, just moderate? Or...
So education, like many other important things in this world, is not simple. And so to make progress in education, if we knew of a surefire way that everybody would improve, I don't think it would be an issue, and we probably wouldn't have this conversation today.
Yes.
The difference is that with education, there are so many factors. There are so many things that weigh into student success and how well students are able to progress. So that's where the real hard work begins, and that is measuring current state, looking at what's working, looking at where there are gaps, and then trying to identify ways to address those gaps, measure again to ensure that what you're doing is working, and then carry on with the things that work and make different decisions about those that don't seem to have an impact.
Oh, thank you very much. So when you say quality education, what do you mean?
So quality of education can be defined, I think, probably by as many different people as you can find will have a different definition. So it's a little bit of a tough one, but in our terms, quality education means an education that allows learners to reach their full potential, to become successful at the next steps, wherever those steps might take them. So for some people, it might be a tertiary education. For others, it might be success in the workforce. For still others, it might be as a small business owner or a self-employed individual. Whatever a person needs in order to achieve success in their life and to be a healthy, happy citizen where they're living is what we look for in quality education. And in every instance, an education is a key foundational block to that kind of success.
Yes, and teachers as well play a very important role in education, I would say.
Yes, that is definitely one of the factors, teachers, but many, many other factors as well.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. We'll be back shortly. This is Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, only the classic hits. Thank you for your company. We're back on Speak Your Mind, Gold FM, only the classic hits. This is our live radio talkback show, and we appreciate your company. Now, we've got from the Pacific community, this is SPC, the Educational Quality Assessment Program Director, Michelle Belisle. And just on our next question, could you please tell us about the micro-qualifications work that the EQAP have or are doing?
Sure. So micro-qualifications is a little bit of a new term in the region. This is something to work towards acknowledging the learning that people do throughout their life. So as we're probably all aware, oftentimes you'll finish your education, go off and get a job, and then there is training associated with that. You will go to a workshop, you will go to training sessions, and oftentimes those are unacknowledged training sessions. In other words, your boss knows about them, values them, that's why the boss sent you there. But if you want to carry them forward into your next role, your next job, what are you showing? So we have worked with countries across the region to start to develop what we call micro-qualifications. We all know a qualification is typically a year-long endeavor, or a 2-year or 3-year in a tertiary institution or a TVET. A micro-qualification is aimed at acknowledging a very specific skill set that somebody acquires, and a micro-qualification is different from just any old workshop in that at the end of it, you have something to acknowledge you've achieved certain learning outcomes. In other words, it's assessed, it's quality assured, and it's recognized. So it's portable. And so that's work that we have been doing just this past year. And in fact, it's right up with the work that's being done in New Zealand. New Zealand calls them micro-credentials, and they put out their first micro-credentials in August of 2018. SPC has completed its first 3 micro-credentials with working with different parts of industry in December of 2018.
Okay, so we have this in Fiji as well.
These are regional micro-credentials, so they cover the whole Pacific.
Oh, lovely. So what kind of certificate can you get?
So the 3 micro-credentials or micro-qualifications that we've worked on so far have been 2 of them in the fisheries. I think one was about safe seafood handling and fisheries seafood small business.
Oh.
And then the other one is in the education area, and it's the specific skill set and training to equip people to be examiners. In other words, those who set the Form 7 completion examinations at a national level.
Okay, so why did you pick these particular ones, the fish and the teacher?
It was through consultation and mutual agreement and a vested interest on the part of the industry areas that were doing these training to have some sort of a portable recognition of the skills that were developed in the participants.
So that's really good. So how long would that course take? Maybe around?
Each of the courses are of differing lengths, so I really don't have an answer for you on that. But
Okay.
it's the definition of micro-qualification is that it's an under 40 week. So it could be any length of time, but it has to be less than a full qualification in terms of time spent.
That's really interesting. So what about if I wanted to come and get this certificate, because it's internationally recognized, it's micro, and I think this is really good. What would I do?
So if you were in one of those industries and you were working in that area, you would apply to come to a provider. Now we're at the moment working on which providers might be offering these various qualifications, but it would be like any other qualification where you or your employer would sign you up, you'd participate, and at the end, it's not just a certificate of participation, there's an assessment, there is an evaluation of the progress, and only those who are successful then are recipient of the micro-qualification.
Thanks so much for that, Michelle. Interesting indeed. Now, on International Education Day, I mean, this is really interesting. This is what we're talking about on Thursday. It's going to be the first one. And why is shining the spotlight on education important?
Well, if we think about what the world around us looks like, education is something that is constant. We all went to school, our children go to school, probably our grandparents went to school. It's always there. But as we age, we find that the world changes around us, and it changes more rapidly than our education has possibly prepared us for.
Exactly.
So shining the spotlight on education, we're also shining the spotlight on the idea that learning is a lifelong endeavor. It begins from the time you're born, and we are still learning. We are still having to learn new things. We are still having to adapt to all of these changes throughout our lives. So when we shine the spotlight on education, we not only shine the spotlight on the idea that a solid foundational education is important, but we also emphasize the idea that one of the things we learn in school is how to learn. In other words, we are able to apply those skills to learning all of the new things that come at us over the next 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 decades that we're on this earth. A lot of time.
Yes.
So that's the importance. And it's not that education is only important on one day of the year, but it's an opportunity for everybody to stop and really take stock of the fact that education is foundational to having people be successful throughout their lives.
That's right, and independent and make the world go around, I suppose.
That's right.
Yes. So what's another initiative that the EQAP is involved in?
So in addition to the micro-qualifications work that I just talked about, we are also involved in working with the region to measure levels of literacy and numeracy in year 4 and 6 students. So just in 2018, we had the 3rd administration of the Pacific Islands Literacy and Numeracy Assessment, and we're now in the process of doing the analysis of those results, and so there'll be lots more on that coming up in July when those results are released to the region. And that is one of the tools that we use to take a benchmark of how students are doing across the region in reading, in writing, and in numeracy concepts. And then from there, we work with countries to analyze their own data and to identify where their strengths are and where we can possibly support initiatives to improve student learning in those areas.
Thank you. Now, how is education linked to peace and development?
So, education, as I said before, I think is probably foundational to peace and development. Without an educated population, without educated children, young people, and adults, it's very difficult to address the challenges that the world's throwing at us. And without having a sustainable education system in your country, you're at the mercy of those around you who have a sustainable and high quality education system.
All right, I'm sorry, I'll have to just cut in short there, but we'll get back to what we were talking about soon on Speak Your Mind, Gold FM, only the classic hits. This is Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, only the classic hits. Thank you a lot for your sweet company, and I hope you're enjoying this talkback show as much as I am. And we've got from the Pacific Community, SPC, the Educational Quality Assessment Program Director, Michelle Belisle, who's been kind enough to come in and talk to us. So now we'll cover the SPC's Human Rights Division's Regional Rights Resources Team. This is the RRRT program. And I know that they're working with the EQAP to incorporate human rights into the school curricula. This is very interesting. Can you tell us how this decision came up?
Certainly. The cooperation actually involves both ECAP and RRRT from SPC, but it also includes the UN Women organization, and it's part of an effort to end violence against women and girls. And so this is an EU-funded program where we're working with ministries in the countries, with RRRT, with the UN, to help students, both primary and secondary, have an understanding of human rights, of inclusion, of gender equality, and all of the things that we would expect of good social citizens across our Pacific region.
Okay, so what is the progress like now of incorporating human rights into the school curricula?
So in late 2018, I guess in about October, there was a large workshop where several of the countries came together along with the partners to work out exactly what this could look like. Mm-hmm. And after that, we've now gotten things underway currently with 3 of the countries, working directly with ministries of education and the stakeholders to develop how human rights fit into the curriculum within the context of the individual country, because it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's a collaborative approach. It has to come from the national level. It's not something that comes in from outside. Yeah. Our role in it is to facilitate the inclusion of those learning outcomes in the curriculum, but also to assist ministries of education with measuring those outcomes. How do we know whether students have acquired these understandings of human rights? And then finally, to help ministries support the teachers who are delivering the program to students.
So like if it was a subject in school, what would it be? Just study human rights for half an hour or something, or 15 minutes?
I think that probably falls to each country to decide, but it could be integrated. It could have to do with how you are addressing things in your wellness curricula when you're teaching children about social studies. It might have to do, you bring it up in topics when they're reading. There's all sorts of different ways it can be integrated. But the idea is to put the lens of human rights, equality, inclusion, against violence against women and children, put that lens so that students are learning about it from the time that they're very young.
Yes, and this is always the best time, I reckon, and I think that's a very good decision. But like you said, I mean, 3 countries have already got them in the region?
They're in the process of working on it as a part of this ongoing project. It's not something we simply just write something up and pop it in. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of trying things out, making sure that everybody is comfortable with the content, making sure that we've respected cultural boundaries, that we've respected people's opinions at all levels. So it's a fairly complicated process,
Yes.
but going well.
Yeah, okay, that's good. I mean, you might have some people who actually go against it, maybe.
And I suppose that's one of the challenges to anything that we develop with countries, and that's one of the key reasons that we do this in a collaborative way and have all of the stakeholders participating to try and bring people on board and move things forward.
Well, I think it is really a good concept, and I'd love to see it in Fiji. But anyway, education is I'm talking about early childhood education. What kind of development does EQAP contribute to this?
So we work closely with the education people at UNICEF here in the Pacific, and we collaborate on a number of things. And I'm sure that Anna will be able to tell you more about that when she arrives. But one of the things that we know is that 90% of a child's brain development has already happened by the time they start school.
Yes.
And so it's so important to begin early to help children develop those education parts of their brain.
Yes, I mean, that is the foundation, for children.
Very much so.
Okay, so is there anything else that you'd like to highlight on your side of the EQAP?
So just the fact that I didn't mention this earlier, and I apologize because I should have, most of our work is funded jointly between the Australian Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT, and New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, as well as member country contributions from the Pacific community as a whole. And for that support, we are extremely grateful, because without that support, we wouldn't be able to work with the region as we are right now.
Right. So what countries will benefit?
So the countries that we typically work with are the member countries of SPC that are a part of the Forum Secretariat. So there are 16 countries in that grouping. However, our services are, of course, available to any of the SPC member countries, so 22 Pacific Island countries and territories.
Oh, that's a lot. So you've been in Fiji for...
Personally, myself, I've been director here at ECAP since April of 2015, so going on 4 years in a couple of months.
Wow.
And it's just flown by. It's been a wonderful experience so far, and I look forward to more years working in this wonderful region.
Oh, that's great. So what else do you look forward to, especially with International Education Day this Thursday? Do you probably have some programs that or work that you'd like to do or are working on this year?
So this year we are sort of at a little bit of a crunch time, because, as you know, this day was only announced in December as everybody was going off on leave. So there hasn't been a lot of time to prepare events. I'm sure in future years there will be a lot more done to recognize the day. So our work right now is to bring it to everyone's attention, but also to highlight some of the things we're doing. And we collaborate with UNICEF, as I mentioned, with RRT, UN Women. We collaborate with UNESCO in Samoa to work with countries. So coming up, we have some data workshops where we have representatives coming in from multiple countries to look at their own education data and to look at how that is best used in political decision making and how it's shared with elected officials and decision makers in the government.
Okay, we'll be back very shortly on Speak Your Mind, Gold FM, only the classic hits. Welcome back to Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, only the classic hits. I'm Louise. This is our live radio talkback show. And yes, a lot of information we've been finding out from the Pacific Community SPC with the director EQAP, Michelle Belisle, who's explained a lot to us. And now we've got from UNICEF education specialist, Anna Smebi. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we've touched on quite a bit, but we'll probably cover something that UNICEF is working on. And this is, I'll ask you the question about do many children in the Pacific miss out on early childhood education in Fiji and the Pacific region?
Oh, thank you. Yes, indeed. Actually, many children in Fiji and in the Pacific do miss out on early learning, both at home and at school. So first, in school, many education systems actually don't give adequate priority to early childhood education, don't make it free and compulsory, and don't allocate adequate budgets to it. And so there really isn't adequate access and quality of early childhood education. I do have to really acknowledge the work of Fiji,
Yes.
which does stand out in the region as a country that has committed to making kindergarten accessible for all children in the country.
Okay.
But in terms of at home, we also know that early learning also happens at home.
Yes.
And parents have a really critical role in building cognitive and social development from the beginning. But many parents don't actually know that they have a role and they have the potential even to do that. And so that's something actually that we need to help parents realize.
Oh, okay. So why don't many children in the Pacific and Fiji, miss early childhood education? Are there any reasons for this
Sure.
that you've established?
Yes. In some cases, it's just an issue of access. There might not be any center near where they live. In some cases, it might be their parents don't recognize the importance. Maybe they never went. They don't see the value. They find their child is too young to go to school. And again, they might not realize actually how much early learning and brain development really does happen before children go to school. If we wait until children go to school, it's too late to start their learning and education process. That needs to start at home.
Right. So they don't see the value of it. So if maybe someone is listening right now, a parent who has not been sending his or her child to kindergarten, what would be your message of why is it so important to get your children to go to kindergarten?
Right. Well, children who go to kindergarten or early childhood education programs have a smoother transition to school. They have the academic preparation, but also the social preparation that they need really to have an easy first day, first month of school, ease into that schooling environment, again, both from the academic perspective and also from the social perspective. But we also know from research that children who attend early childhood education do better much later in life as well. Better economic outcomes, reduced criminality, better health outcomes even, and it's all because those foundations are set early on.
That is so important. A very great explanation. So it's just a transition, you would say, preparing you for more work ahead. So what difference can be made in a child's life when they have the opportunity to access early childhood education?
It really does make an enormous difference in the development of that child and all of their future prospects. We can say that child development or learning is like building a wall. If those first stones that you establish in the wall are not strong, the rest of the wall won't really have any potential for success. You need that strong foundation.
Yes.
In order to build a strong house on top of that foundation, for example.
Right.
Today we're here to talk about peace and development. Early childhood education is the foundation for all future development, and that means it's the foundation for peace and development. Children who have access to quality early childhood education have improved academic performance, so they have better literacy and numeracy, but those are not the only important things. They have better social and economic social and emotional skills, so better empathy, conflict resolution, these sorts of things that we see are the foundations for peace. And then they also have, as I said before, better economic performance later on in life.
Well, that's something. It's proven, and it is quite amazing what a difference that going to kindergarten means. But it is really quite sad for people, who live in remote areas, like you said, and don't have kindergarten. So, I'm sure that, looking ahead, we need to, get communities maybe to organize something with the government to get more kindergartens. But like you said, Fiji, we're doing quite well. So this is part of the SDG number 4 goals. Right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes, a big impact it has, doesn't it? So what are some of the impacts for society and communities to invest in early childhood education? I think you've actually answered quite a lot of that already, but you might like to add a bit more.
Sure. I think there's one other piece that I failed to mention on the last question I'd like to add, if I might, which is, in addition to the academic and the social and emotional pieces, are also the skills for learning. I think those are also really critical. Curiosity, problem solving, the desire to learn, the skill of having persistence, not giving up. These are also really critical things that we develop in early childhood if we have the right supports. So if you can imagine a society where children have supports to build academic skills, build social and emotional skills, and this desire to always do better, imagine what is the future of that child and what is the future of that society.
Exactly. I mean, that feeling has to be consistent, and obviously the support of parents at home, which, like you said, is actually the main thing. Because, I mean, okay, what about if parents aren't able to send their children to kindergarten? How are they supposed to teach their children? Like, what a kindergarten teacher does, I don't think it will be as much, but maybe the basics. What would you be able to share with us something?
Sure. I think it's important actually even to start before kindergarten. Again, learning starts from birth. Children start learning from the moment they're born or even before, and we need to be present in their lives, singing, talking, playing with children, even from when they're babies, helps build those cognitive foundations.
Thank you. We'll have to get back on Speak Your Mind. Gold FM, only the classic hits. Thank you for watching Speak Your Mind and also listening. It's a live radio talkback show. If you have a question, you can call 3220-907 or 7732-907. And we've got from UNICEF, the education specialist, Anna Smebi, who's been very good in explaining everything about the importance of going to kindergarten, the foundation of education. Of course, we look this Thursday at celebrating for the very first time an International Education Day. So as you were saying about, how a parent can actually teach their own child to be smart. I mean, you've mentioned you learn from a very young age, and I must say very fast too. I mean, you see how children just learn. It's amazing. I think that our brains are built that way. But, of course, we've got our friend from the EQAP director, Michelle Bellal. You might want to add something that our friend was discussing, Anna.
Sure. So Anna had mentioned about the importance of early childhood learning and how it affects a number of things growing older, but particularly I want to focus in on the ideas of literacy and numeracy. In our school systems across the world, actually, we have tended to measure students' progress and take sort of a benchmark of that around about year 4. And in actual fact, that early childhood learning and those early years of learning in school are so critical. If we recognize that a child is struggling to read or struggling to write at year 4, it's almost too late. And so one of the things that parents can do, that we can do through organized early childhood experiences and also at the primary grades, is one-on-one as teachers and parents, really pay attention to when students are struggling and intervene right away. And that's one of the things that through ECAP, through the PILNA, we try to support, and as well some of the work that UNICEF has been doing. Try to support that early intervention when students are struggling to read, to give them those successes that will lead to future success throughout their educational life.
That's a really good point. Yes, I mean, sometimes, we see children and we think, some are faster in learning than others. So she's brought up a great point. If teachers could actually, have a one-to-one talk to the child to make the child better. And of course, the parent to be involved. Yes?
Yes. And in fact, Michelle's touched on a really important point, which is understanding the level of quality in the education system and the level of learning of students. And it's very easy for us to talk about access to kindergarten. What percentage of children have access? Great. And that's a great thing to measure, but it's not the end. It's not the final aim. The final aim is that children are learning. And we know for them to learn that education has to be quality. And so actually there is a really critical piece of work to ensure that education systems are able to provide quality kindergarten, that we have the means to measure that and track that, support those kindergartens that are not of adequate quality to improve,
Yes.
and similarly track the learning of pupils. So those who are struggling can get the additional support they need and catch up to their peers.
Right.
Because this is not something for just a small group of children. It's for the entire set of children in the country, and it's really critical that all of them can benefit from that. And that's only possible when all of it is of adequate quality.
Thank you. Now, how can you tell if a kindergarten is struggling? How would education people be able to find out? There's always a way of measuring. Do they?
Yeah, there are different ways, and it depends on the government system in place.
Okay.
In many countries, they do have quality standards for kindergartens or early childhood centers. In many, they would have an inspectorate or someone who goes to visit to assess. Sometimes they have school committees who do a self-assessment and do an improvement plan for the school or the center, often involving the communities. But the structure set up really vary by country.
Yes.
And we as UNICEF, we support the role of governments in developing their own systems. So we follow the lead of the governments to build the systems that they have.
And I would just carry on from there because that's some of the work that ECAP is involved with as well, working with ministries of education to benchmark the quality of their education systems, their leadership, their teacher education programs, all with a view to getting the best possible education system in place to serve the needs of the children.
Yes, I see Fiji is doing quite well. Even I see my grandchildren and, I've seen kindergartens too. And I'm like, hey, man, in my time, we didn't have to learn that much. You know what I mean? Well, that's what I thought. So, maybe you got something to say about that?
Yeah, I can maybe
Or
add.
moving with times, maybe.
Yes. Well, I think it's twofold. In fact, children have greater potential than we often give them credit for. So they actually
Okay.
can learn so much more than sometimes we think.
Yes.
I think so it's great to give them expanded opportunities we never had.
Right.
On the other hand, we shouldn't be pushing down a highly academic primary school type of teaching to early childhood. Children in kindergarten are young children. They learn through play, they learn through fun, and that's how they develop their love for learning. And so we need to be sure that they're getting developmentally appropriate, age-appropriate types of education in early childhood.
So they're to be having fun while they're learning.
That's right.
Yeah, they can't be just all serious and, like...
No.
Oh, okay. So maybe just reiterate the critical role of education. It is the heart of development. So what would you like to urge all stakeholders
So
to do?
I think we often focus on the big things like the Day of Education or the Sustainable Development Goal, or perhaps it's a regional or a national goal. But I think what we really need to focus on is that for us to evolve as a society, wherever we are in the world, is we have to embrace the idea of lifelong learning, lifelong being right from birth. We learn all the time and we benefit from that learning. And I think being supportive of that idea of lifelong learning, tracking it, ensuring it's available, not just accessible, but also of high quality to every person is so critical. And that's what's going to lead to being the foundations, the building blocks, as Anna was saying, for development and for peace and sustainability.
So education is really so important. It gives us a broad mind. You can add on. Thursday's Education Day. So when you're educated, you have a broader mind. You know what's happening.
You do, and that's from a very theoretical perspective, but also from the very tangible. And we talked about micro-qualifications and the fact that that adults are learning into their 60s
Yes.
and achieving new knowledge and new skills. And children are learning and acquiring skills when they're just babies. And so it's all across the spectrum. And it's important to acknowledge the importance of that education and to support governments and systems and parents and students in achieving those education outcomes.
All right. Well, that's it. That's the end of the Talkback Show. And I thank you so much for coming in today and sharing the wisdom with us. Education, very important. You learn from the cradle to the grave, I would say. But anyway, from UNICEF, the education specialist, Anna Smeby, thank you indeed. Many
Thank you
thanks.
very much.
Thank you. And also many thanks to you, my friend Michelle.
Thank you.
From South Pacific Community. So that's it for now. Speak Your Mind on Gold FM, only the classic hits. Until next week, Nisamo Demanda.